And before passing the floor on the Commission and the External Action Service, let me use this opportunity to say something as double-headed Vice Chair and somebody who comes from Mostar. I wish that this town that is so symbolical and emblematic town with the old bridge and a town that meant reconciliation for Bosnia and Herzegovina and for the European Union, finally finds a real path and unfortunately corrects all the mistakes that were made during these really badly done elections. So I would also like to ask the Commission to give us some answers on what is going on with the election procedure in this town. And the other issue, I would like to find out as well the reply from the Commission on the proposal by the rapporteur on the constitutional changes, and how are we going to pass to this Brussels phase as we are sitting in the middle of Europe in Belgium that has found this way to combine all the requirements and that include cultural and the language differences. And we are very well aware that Bosnia and Herzegovina is struggling to find this fine balance between collective, cultural, and individual rights that we all require from this country in order to access to European Union. And this proposal by the rapporteur was very, very well done, and I think that European Parliament could be used as a facilitator. And the final issue is migration crisis. Bosnia and Herzegovina is absolutely unable to fight with this severe peace and security issue on its own, and we do expect much more involvement, much more focus, and much more help to Bosnia and Herzegovina authorities, as this country is also under shared responsibility by international community, not only on its own. We still do know that because we have an Office of High Representative there and a Peace Implementation Council. So thank you very much. There are many questions to be answered, and also I hope that much more interest will be shown in the future by our colleagues on this country, because the focus on Bosnia and Herzegovina should be there in a peaceful time as it was in a wartime. Now I'm passing the floor to Madame Mihaela Matuela from the DG NIR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair, honourable members. First of all, thank you very much to the rapporteur, Mr. Rangel, for his draft report, which is certainly balanced but also very much in line with the Commission findings, but also the Commission recommendations, and that's of course very important, as the consistency of our messages will certainly help guiding the authorities throughout the reform process that clearly lies ahead of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Let me refer to the opinion. Of course, it has been mentioned in several occasions, in several interventions. The Commission had identified 14 key priorities in its opinion on Bosnia-Herzegovina membership application, and certainly these conditions that are the condition for opening negotiations are very well covered in the draft report. We certainly welcome, and looking a little bit of some of the elements of the report, we certainly welcome the focus, the emphasis that has been put on the element of reconciliation. It has been mentioned also by a number of interventions that we have very recently marked the 25th anniversary of Dayton, and it is clear from also the debates that have been triggered by this anniversary that the time has come indeed for Bosnia and Herzegovina to move from Dayton to Brussels, and reconciliation is an important element, of course, in this context. We have seen a number of positive developments recently. We certainly concur with the point also that was made that we also need to emphasize the positive developments that have taken place, but certainly we would have seen more. Mostar elections is certainly an example in that sense, but there is more also, of course, needed in order also to address the various outstanding issues also ahead of the elections of 2022. the reforms will be challenging. It will be reforms that tackle, and in a way I'm summarizing a little bit the essence of the opinion when it comes to the fundamental reforms that will be needed by Bosnia-Herzegovina. They have to tackle both the important element of equality and non-discrimination of all citizens, and also the element of functionality. Let me bring an element in this when it comes to the migration situation, which has also been mentioned in a number of interventions. It's clear that on the migration front, what we have seen is a humanitarian crisis in the past, towards the end of the year, that was due to the inaction of the decision makers in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The situation is now improving. Certainly, what has happened is that lives have been saved, which of course was a very important objective of the intervention, and all the pressure that collectively also various EU representatives have put. But of course, there again there is need to do more, both for the let's say temporary solution that now is in the process in Libya, but also for the longer term, to have a sustainable migration management system in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And it's not, of course, by coincidence that this issue, so the issue of creating a good system in terms of migration management, but also management of the asylum system and of border management as well, were included among the 14 key priorities of the opinion. Because we have been supporting Bosnia-Herzegovina in this process for many years, since the beginning of this migration situation, and we are supporting it not only with the financial means, but also with the political facilitation, but also by putting at disposal of the authorities an expert from a EU member states to help exactly on the element of coordination. Because let's not forget that this what has happened on the migration front in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and it has been mentioned in one of the interventions, is also a reflection of the fact that there is a serious problem of functionality in the country, that this migration crisis are somehow exposed. And therefore, it has clearly emphasized, underlined the need for the urgency also of the reforms that also in the opinion the Commission has analyzed and recommended. One last word when it comes maybe to the reform priorities is certainly the judiciary, the rule of law in general. There is need, and again here I would like to underline the urgency of the reforms in this area, because it is important to restore the citizens' trust in the judiciary in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This was clear also in another rule of law convention that we organized at the end of last year. It was the second of this type that we organized in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Excited to create dialogue also in the country on these aspects, and to together with all the stakeholders identify what of course the solutions could be, and also of course with the experts input. And this is something that certainly will remain at the core of the interventions in the coming period. On our side, we of course will continue supporting Bosnia-Herzegovina in all of the efforts that will be necessary to fulfill the 14 key priorities, but certainly it is for the Bosnia-Herzegovina leadership to drive this process forward to make it happen. But certainly from the Commission side, there is a very strong commitment to support these efforts in all possible ways, with the technical advice, with the political facilitation, with the financial support where needed, of course. And let me conclude also by recalling also that the strong support of the EU to Bosnia-Herzegovina has been certainly recalled and emphasized in all possible occasions, but certainly also in the context of the migration management, but also in the support that has been provided to the handling of the challenge that came with the COVID pandemics, where again, without going into the details, but a package of support has been very rapidly put together and put at disposal of Bosnia-Herzegovina and its citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Matuela. And now we are passing the floor to External Action Service, Ms. Elsa Fennett, Head of Western Balkan Division. Thank you very much, Mr. Fennett. Ms. Fennett, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members. I would also like to start by thanking Mr. Rangel for his excellent draft report. And I would also like to start my intervention with a reference to the need for reconciliation, for in-depth reconciliation of the country. We strongly believe that this is really very much at the core of the path that all of the country will be able to come together to actually implement the reforms. This was made very clear indeed, as Mrs. Strick mentioned, during the visit of the HRVP to Sarajevo on the 21st of November on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Agreement. What we have seen very much is at that moment, the ability, for instance, of the presidency of the country to come together with a very powerful declaration on the need for reconciliation. On the other hand, we saw also the limitations in the fact that they were not able to organize a joint celebration on this occasion. The HRVP's message was twofold. One, indeed, calling, therefore, for the leaders to translate this declaration into concrete actions and to put it on the top of the political agenda. And two, to actually allow the country to make decisive progress on the reforms, as mentioned in the Commission's opinion. In response to one of the calls that was made during the debate today, in terms of what can we do more to help the country? I think I'd just like to recall that the Commission's opinion and the 14 key priorities indeed provide a very clear blueprint in terms of what the country should be able to do to overcome the challenges that it faces. And the draft report of Mr. Rangel indeed details a lot of these challenges that still have to be overcome by the country. With the positives, if the reference was made to the National War Crime Strategy that was adopted, and again requires now tangible implementation, but also to the composition of the SAPC delegation. And I think also in response to one of the calls for more active involvement of the European Parliament, we certainly very much look forward to holding the joint sessions of the SAPC as soon as possible, so that we can all benefit from a very active involvement of the honourable members of Parliament. In terms of the other aspects mentioned in the draft report, certainly the priority to be given to rule of law and to the all of the reforms that are needed under this field certainly require renewed emphasis and commitment from the side of the authorities. But I would like to highlight the events indeed that happened over the last weeks in terms of migration, because it was said that they represent very much how the difficulties of the countries in terms of actually enforcing some of the decisions that it has made at the highest level. You will have all seen, indeed, and as discussed last week also in the Parliament, the specific efforts that were made over the end of year period with the HRVP, indeed having regular calls, having regular engagement, statements, letters as well to the authorities that resulted in concrete progress on the ground. We have indeed, as my colleague from the Commission mentioned, saved lives because we were facing an immediate humanitarian situation. However, as mentioned in the 14 key priorities and in the draft report, we do need a more sustainable system to be put in place so that we do not have these recurrent humanitarian crises on a periodic basis. I think in terms of what it showed is that indeed we have weaknesses in the governments of the country. However, we've also said that a decentralized state structure is compatible with EU membership. However, the institutions have to be improved, have to work effectively to administer their competencies so that they're able afterwards to participate in the EU decision making, because as was said, this is the objective, which is when the country is ready for EU membership. This year is in principle a non-election year, so we are looking forward to being able indeed to support them with a number of very difficult reforms, not least on elections, with the implementation of the pending court decisions, of the decisions of the Bosnia Constitutional Court as well, the OSCE, the Greco recommendations. There is a momentum that we need to address before the elections of 2022. Finally, I would just like to mention the last word on foreign policy alignment. The role of other third countries was also mentioned. I think from this perspective, we have seen, again, some positive progress compared to 2019. We are now at 70% alignment compared to 61%. However, we know that there are a number of important issues where Bosnia-Herzegovina does not align. And this is why it's so important to continue explaining our foreign policy, explaining our expectations, so that we continue to see this very positive stepping up of alignment. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Fene. That was really good remarks, and I appreciate your intervention. And now we are coming back to our reporter for reaction and his closing remarks. Mr. Rangel, you have all the time, so just...
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'll try to be brief. First, I say that I find that there is a quite strong consensus among the different interventions, because as I have underlined in the very beginning of my presentation, there is a lot of dimensions of the life of Bosnia-Herzegovina that could be not treated in the first version of the report because of the space limit. But now we have some capacity, without being very periphrastic, that means without inventing words, but we have some capacity to include the main contributions that were given today. I must say, for instance, that it is quite clear that the involvement of civil society is something that should be clearly stated here. By the way, we tried to have a kind of democratic convention in the beginning of April and then in the beginning of June, but only due to the pandemic this was not possible, and this would be a kind of rehearsal for the Conference for the Future of Europe. So we were innovating in Bosnia-Herzegovina and then trying to transport this very same concept to the core of the European Union. And so this means that, for me, the engagement of civil society is really very important. By the way, I believe that is one of the ways of overcoming the impasse and the deadlock of some dialogue, because civil society organizations like the academy, like a lot of NGOs and so on, they are the ones that, not regarding what is their, I'd say, background from Republika Srpska or from Croats or from Bosniaks, etc., they are the ones that really want to move forward. And so they are a key actor here. Then let me say that, of course, gender equality will be, that's something that we should really stress. And by the way, when we refer to the 14 key issues that the Commission has defined 2 years ago, there is the protection of gender equality very clear in this regard, especially in what respects to human rights. So the protection of women, of gender equality, of LGBTI rights, and so on. So this is quite clear to me. Let me say that there was also here some reference to the importance of the environment issues. They are referred in a very, very I'd say poor manner, but we can enrich the text with this kind of insights. Of course, I think that, if you allow me, we should really focus also again in the institutional issues. Why? Because as the External Action Service has just pointed out, we have a year that is a kind of gap year. It is a year where we can have a window of opportunity to move forward. I believe that if Bosnian authorities, Bosnian politicians, as I used to call them, the stakeholders of the process, if they engage themselves, there's a lot of reforms that are in the 14 key issues. I wouldn't say all, but there are a lot of them that can be achieved in the short term. That means in 1 year. Because a lot of these reforms are legislative reforms. When we want to change, for instance, education or health system, this naturally takes a lot of time. We only see the effects in 4, 5, 6 years' time. But if we look at the institutional framework, in the majority of situations, this is a matter of some reform in legislation and in institutions. And this can be done in a quite quick way. I even say not to run, but we can do it in time in order to show to the European Union that the steps that are needed to have the candidate status are being taken. For that, as I have underlined, I think that European Parliament, European Commission, the External Action Service, even people nominated by these bodies could help. Because it's not so difficult. A lot of things are already established by previous recommendations or reports. A lot of them are very easy to solve if you look at the way other countries solve their own problems. So we don't have to invent the wheel to solve some of the institutional impasses that exist in Bosnia. We only have to sit everybody around the table and try to see what solutions could be balanced in order to create this goodwill. And so I really believe that this is possible. One of the problems sometimes, let me say this in a very, I'd say, blunt manner. One of the problems of the European Union when we try to tackle the issues in Bosnia is that Europeans are skeptical. They think that it is not possible. And that is a huge mistake. Because it is possible. What we need is to have goodwill from the stakeholders, but also engagement of European Union in order to balance this negotiation. I think that this is possible. And so I'm an optimist in the case of Bosnia. And I think that the people of Bosnia, they deserve our effort. They cannot be the forgotten ones, even of Western Balkans. They cannot be. And so we have to put them as a priority to show that we want really to help. And of course, we have also to create an atmosphere where the Bosnian authorities are, I'd say, open to this process. Let me say one thing. I know that everybody is very enthusiastic about the sentence of High Representative Borrell. We have to move from Dayton to Brussels. I fully understand the beauty of this phrase, but I would prefer to say, let's move from Dayton to Sarajevo. Let's move from Dayton to Sarajevo, Banja Luka, Mostar. Let's move. because it's the Bosnians that have to take the responsibility. Dayton was very important to solve the peace issue. But now it's not peace that is at stake. It is development, it is rule of law, it is human rights, it is prosperity. And this has to be achieved by the Bosnians. And so what we need is not a constitutional and institutional framework designed by Brussels. It is inspired by Brussels, but it should be done in the territory of Bosnia, with the Bosnians and with their will. And so let's move from Dayton to Bosnia. And then you see, if we move from Dayton to Bosnia, Bosnia will be seated in this house in some time. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Rangel. And with this final word, I'm receiving some calls by my colleagues, but I think now it's after these beautiful words said and inspired by the Portuguese rapporteur, and the congratulations on the Portuguese presidency and on the election of the new president. And as the late Cutiliero has inspired us in the beginning and probably could have saved many lives if we have listened to him. At that time, I hope that Bosnia and Herzegovina will be listening to the words of our rapporteur, Paulo Rangel, and finally start looking for the solution of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Sarajevo, Mostar, and Banja Luka. Thank you very much, and thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Romeo Franz. And finally, I hope that we will have a delegation, our delegation soon, and soon a meeting as well with European parliamentarians, and also that we will be able to organize some facilitation of this necessary dialogue in this election year that we are having ahead. I mean, if... Yeah, the debate is now finally, over. So thank you so much, and I finally close the